Hey folks, welcome back. Time to look at some more stuff for the Legend of the Five Rings role-playing game from FFG and now Edge Studio. Now as you can see, this is the beginner game. So this is kind of the starter set for the system. You can see there's still a Fantasy Flight logo here on the back, or on the front rather, and Fantasy Flight on the back with no sign of Edge Studios. That's because they haven't reprinted it yet. It's supposed to be coming back soon, theoretically, along with all the dice and the other stuff you need to play the game, so keep a lookout for that. Unfortunately, I think I bought up the last retail supply of L5R dice that I could find in the UK, so sorry about that. But if anybody wants to join the game with me, send a message, leave a comment, and I'll give you a demo, maybe. I picked this up on eBay, and it was actually pretty much, I mean, the box has been a little bit sort of haggard, but that was my number one critique of all the FFG starter sets, including the Star Wars ones, is that the boxes are real rubbish. Really thin cardboard. I mean, they fray really easily, and basically, I mean, once you open them up, there's not much use in keeping it. That's why I put all four of my Star Wars FFG starter sets, just mashed them into one box and got rid of the rest because they just don't hold up over time. Whereas the other starter sets you get from, say, Chaosium, Free League, etc., they're much more solid. So that aspect, I think, is a real shame because, you know, as you can see, the artwork is really beautiful on the front, you know, it really represents well the feeling of the game. You have people in exotic, traditional, sort of Japanese feudal wear. You've got samurai and katanas and stuff. You've got, you know, a monk gathering his chi on the reverse side. It gives you the right atmosphere for the game, but the box is just not going to last, so just keep that in mind. But if you can find one, I think it's a great introduction to the game. I haven't actually fully opened this up, so this is kind of a unboxing-ish, first impressions kind of video. And see, when you pop these open, you notice just how much empty space there is. So you got some dice way down there in the bottom of this channel here, and then you got a bunch of stuff stacked up, and the rest is just air. So I really think they could have come up with a less wasteful and maybe more exciting way to present these boxes. Maybe have like a more solid box, like a 1-inch thick, you know, Chaosium Call of Cthulhu starter set style box, and put the dice in there tucked in along the top like they do, and have a much more longer lasting box instead of all this emptiness. But Edge is reprinting things, I think, exactly as they were, as far as I know, so we probably won't see any changes there. One great thing, however, with this starter set is that unlike Star Wars, unlike, in fact, most starter sets for some of the systems that we've seen, you actually have a decent amount of dice in here. So you have 5 of white dice, 5 of the void dice, and basically that's pretty much the maximum that any one player will need. So you'll need to pass these around the table from player to player, but you can actually play like even a high-level character with these dice. It's very rare that you need 6 of anything, basically. There's only a few species or paths that can take you to values above 6, but nevertheless, this is now my 4th set of L5R dice, so when I do get somebody around a table, we'll have more than enough to play. So before we dig into it, on the back, they promote this as a learn-as-you-go adventure. So you can jump right in and play as you learn the game, using pre-gen character folios to keep the rules right at their fingertips. Custom dice and an exciting gameplay system make every roll a dramatic event. Detailed rules provide for hours of entertainment as you create your own adventures and tell your own stories. Complete standalone game for 3 to 5 players. So it's constructed much like the Star Wars beginner sets were, except in the case of L5R, you don't have all these different eras and settings and stuff to go for. So they've just got the one starter set. Contents-wise, we have a lovely map of Rokugan in poster size, so I'll have to show you bit by bit as per usual. It matches the one in the core book, so no new information particularly, but nevertheless, nice to have a huge one to look at the table, share amongst the players, you know, so you kind of know where you're at if you're moving around the countryside, for example, where the key areas are. Then we have the pre-gen character folios. So we have, 4 character folios. Just want to make sure, it said 3 to 5 players, but I guess they're including the GM. So one of these, we have a courtier of the Crane clan. So we've got an illustration on the front. They're called Doji Ren. Then we have lots of info in here in these folios, which is really helpful for new players. So they welcome you to the Emerald Empire. They tell you about your clan, about your school. So your school, in this case, is Doji Diplomat. And they mentioned the Crane clan being the masters of diplomacy. So it's a good fit for them. Tell you a little bit about the Code of Bushido, and the tenet of courtesy in particular is of deep importance to you as a diplomat. Then there are wise words from your sensei. So these are some hot tips on how to think about yourself as a samurai in the Emerald Empire. Then there's some basic, what's role-playing game kind of stuff. The story of your character so far, why they've come to this adventure, which is called the Topaz Championship, and then what you're thinking about as you travel to the site of the temple from Shizuka Toshi. And then we get into the character sheet itself, which is expanded out from the more compact format. So they have lots of room for annotations here. So we've got the rings and ring values, which are nicely labeled here: Earth, Air, Water, Fire, and Void. We can see that Air is the strongest ring for this particular character. And they got an endurance of 6, composure of 6, and your reaction when you exceed your composure is unseemly weeping. There you go. They got a focus of 5, vigilance of 3, 2 void points, and 57 honor, which is pretty high, and 57 glory, which is also not bad. Then they tell you about approaches and the dice they add, which is of course based on your ratings in each of these rings. And then you have your skills and the dice that they add to the roll. So this is an early starting character, so most skills you only have 1 rank, but you do have 2 ranks here in courtesy under social. So that helps you obviously in diplomatic checks. Then they outline your conflict stances. So this is one of the core aspects of the game. You can approach situations from different kind of energies, different kind of ways of being, which are represented by the 5 elements. So during a conflict, it outlines how that works. And then we have some info about your character. So your personal turmoil, your school ability. So you have the ability to speak in silence. Once per scene when making a check to persuade or influence someone, you may add 1 kept void dice, showing opportunity result. Then your advantage is dangerous allure. You have an air of intimidating beauty that leaves others can rarely ignore and leaves an impression on those around you. And that means in game terms, you may reroll up to 2 dice of your choice when your advantage helps you on any check. So there you go. Social interactions, basically, you're a hottie. That's how it works. Then they give you some really helpful info along the top and side of the second page here. So how to perform a check, which we've been through before. What you can do during a combat turn. So you should set your stance, which we have, of course, summarized again down here. Move 1 range band and perform one of the following actions. And you can use your school ability, and that doesn't count as a separate action. Then your health and standing in the championship is sort of outlined here. Basically, how you go about trying to win the Topaz Championship. And they, of course, they have a handy reference to the different results you can get on the dice. So success being the circle, explosive success being a triplet of circly things, opportunity being a flowery arrangement, and strife being this sort of upside down heart looking thing. There's probably more sophisticated interpretations of those symbols, but I don't know what they are. And it says, stop, don't turn the page. We're going to do that. Spoiler alert. So basically here you can change the character up if you want. So you can get some base experience points. It guides you on how to spend them. And then you can set up the character how you want, basically, which is a nice thing. So that's what a basic character folio looks like. And on the back, they tell you about why you might want to select this character and their backstory, basically. So a lot of info for each character, which I think is really helpful. This game really is focused on kind of the Code Bushido, social interactions, codes of honor. So having background on your characters, what their standing is, what they do socially, what they do in combat, all that stuff matters. And they give you plenty to work with, so you don't have to come up with backstories and character reactions on the spot. They give you something to play with right from the beginning. So in this case, we have, what's the name? Togashi Yoshi. There we go. They are from the Dragon Clan. So the Dragon Clan is kind of based in the mountains and are a bit more kind of seekers of enlightenment since they're a bit more isolated. So they're good for monks, basically, and for basically the supernatural is something they're quite familiar with. So they talk about your school, which is the Togashi Tattooed Seeker. So this is one of the monastic orders that we see with the Dragon Clan. Then we have, again, wise words from the sensei, how to play your character, your story so far, and what will be on your mind as you're traveling from Tsuma to the High House of Light. Then we have the character stats. So he's got a little bit more ranks as far as skills go. He's got good endurance and composure. He has a 3 in earth, and the rest are 1s and 2s, same as Doji Ren. But then in skills, he's got less of a spread, and instead has gone for a couple of higher ranking skills. So he's got 2 skill ranks in theology, 2 in meditation, and 2 in fitness. So, there's much less sort of spread of skills than we saw with Doji, but a couple of them are quite a bit stronger by having another skill dice, which can give you explosive successes. The more skill dice you roll, the better off you are compared to the void dice. Then again, we have summaries of how everything works. And also, I should have noted this before with the other character. They give you your weapons and gear as well. So he fights as a monk, so he has a staff, or he can fight unarmed. And you can spend 2 opportunity from a successful check to inflict a critical strike on the opponent. His school ability is Blood of the Kami. So when he does a martial arts unarmed check, you may add 1 rolled void ring die showing 1 opportunity result. So it's pretty cool. It gives you automatic opportunity to spend potentially on crit or something when you're making a martial arts attack. Your advantage is keen sight, so you can spot details of objects at a much greater distance than others can, and can pick up on small visual details that others might overlook. The game effect of that is you may reroll up to 2 dice of your choice when your advantage helps you in any check. And once again, we have their pathway to potential victory in the tournament. Stop, don't turn it. We're going to turn it. Yeah, and again, we have sort of base values for the character based on this path, and then if you want, you can sort of reconstruct them from the ground up, or you can, choose a different starting point in advance if you gain some XP at the end of the adventure, etc. So it's as with the Star Wars character folios, they give you kind of a fully pre-generated character, and then they give you a blanked out version if you want to refine your vision of that character for yourself, or advance, in different ways and try a follow-up adventure. And I believe, just as with the FFG Star Wars starting games, they do have a free follow-up for this. So just quickly, we'll pop back to this and see. I didn't show you what the courtier was armed with. They have their fists or a blunted or wooden sword, which does damage 2, and again, you can spend 2 opportunity to inflict a critical strike. They also have elegant robes and a calligraphy kit. Pretty much everybody has a traveling kit and money, varying amounts of money, of course, depending on who they are, what their focus is. Then we have a Shugenja of the Phoenix Clan called Isawa Aki. So Phoenix Clan are well known for being very much in tune with magic and the elements, so it makes sense to have the Shugenja be from the Phoenix Clan. And so their school is the Isawa Elementalist, and they are one of the oldest and greatest Shugenja families in the Empire, in fact. So for her, the tenet of righteousness is the most important part of the Code of Bushido. And as per before, we have a little bit about some hot tips on playing your character, the story so far, and then we get into her actual stats. So we have 3 in fire, and again, we've gone for less of a spread of skills. She's not as much of a social character as Doji, so she's focused more on getting a lot of understanding of religion and spirits. We got 3 ranks there, which is pretty intense. Then we got 1 rank in composition, 1 rank in meditation, and 1 each in courtesy and games. So she can do a few social interactions pretty well, but really she's more about mastering the mystical. She's got, as you can see, a lower endurance and composure as well than the monk, so not built for martial fighting, as is the case with most Shugenja. As usual, we have our equipment over here. We've got fists and a staff, and that's it. Basically, you're going to be working more with spells and such as in this type of character. Her school ability is at 1 with the elements, so once per scene when making a theology check before rolling the dice, you may reduce the target number of the check by 1. And then the advantage is 6th sense, so you are especially sensitive to mystical phenomena. You may reroll up to 2 dice of your choice when your advantage helps you on any check. Very cool. Don't turn the page. We're going to do it. So here now we have, again, a blanked out version of the character sheet, which gives us a few more options as far as techniques you can pick up. So here we have Path to Inner Peace, which is a theology water check and allows you to heal 2 fatigue plus any bonus successes to target yourself or another character. And you can spend opportunity to target 1 extra character per opportunity spent this way. Then you have Tempest of Air, which is an air attack. You target everyone at range 2 to 3, and if you succeed, each target suffers 2 damage. And you can spend 2 opportunity to exclude 1 character from these effects. So you can protect your friends if you have some opportunity to spend, even if they are in the area of effect. And in this version, she can also pick up a katana, which is, as you can see, much more damaging than a staff, which you would find in our other 2 characters so far. Does the base version? Yeah, the base version has a staff. But you can choose to give her a katana if you like. And again, we have how you can buy stuff with XP and some further reminders around here as well. So there you go. That's Isawa Aki, the Shugenja of the Phoenix. And now we have a warrior, Obushi, of the Lion Clan. This is Akado Masako. So, what do we got here? The Lion Clan, they are the militant clan. They control the famous Akado War College, so they're focused on control of one's weapons, of the battlefield, the flow of conflict, and ultimately over oneself. Here at the Castle of the Swift Sword, we study the advice of leadership, the last word on the art of war. We often treat war as a game of Go to be decided by exact moves. We strike precisely and without hesitation, whether using a sword or commanding a unit. And in fact, as you will have seen in my coverage of the related supplement, the Lion Clan are great to use when you want to have a strategic kind of war sort of based campaign. They're particularly good at that compared to the other clans. This particular character, the tenet of honor, is of deep importance, as at the center of your clan's view of Bushido. And then we have, once again, some hot tips from the sensei, how to play your character, your story so far, and then into the stats. So he's got an endurance of 8 and composure of 12. When he exceeds his composure, You will angrily call out challenges to foes for combat, which could be very inappropriate. But you can see he's got a very high starting honor, which is pretty good. And he's also got 2 rings at 3. But in exchange, there's 2 rings that are at 1 and the others at 2. So both earth and water are at 3. And then skills-wise, of course, as you can imagine, most of the skill focuses are on martial skills. So he does have the ability to craft weapons and armor at a low level. He's got 1 rank in fitness, 2 ranks in melee combat, which is close range weapons, nothing in range combat, 1 rank in martial arts unarmed, 1 rank in meditation, and 1 rank in tactics, which is useful for commanding units, and 2 ranks in government, so knowing about how the empire operates. So if you want to be a good commander, you need to know some politics as well. And now the default starting character has just a blunted or wooden sword, which again only does 2 damage. I guess that we haven't looked at the adventure yet, but I guess the setup is that this is supposed to be a sort of non-lethal combat rather than slashing people to bits, but who knows. His school ability is Way of the Lion. When you succeed in an attack check, you may remove 1 strife and add 1 bonus success to the check, which is very cool. Your advantage is Indomitable Will. Although nobody is without fear, your will is strong and cannot be overcome easily. You may roll up to 2 dice of your choice when your advantage helps you on any check. That's handy. And we'll go into the spoiler zone again. And here we can see there are some techniques you could add. Lord Akodo's Roar. So once per game session, you can make a TN1 command void check targeting each hostile character within range band 0 to 1. If you succeed, each target suffers 4 strife. Or striking as Earth, you may make a martial arts Earth check in a skirmish. You can spend opportunities to subtract 1 from the damage attacks inflict on you per opportunity spent until the beginning of your next turn. And of course, you can get a real katana instead of a blunted sword, which would be much more useful on the battlefield. So there you go. Just for the sake of completion, I'm not sure we looked at the additional techniques that were available for Doji and Togashi. So the new techniques that would open up for our Crane Diplomat would be Lady Doji's Decree. Once per game session, make a courtesy void check against an enemy with a TN equal to their vigilance. If you succeed, the enemy cannot perform attack actions targeting you. This lasts for 1 round plus additional rounds equal to your bonus successes or until you perform an attack action yourself. Or Shallow Waters, once you make a social skill water check targeting a character, you may spend opportunity to learn 1 material item or worldly experience the target desires. That's interesting. That should be particularly handy in diplomatic situations and maneuverings politically. As for our monk from the Dragon Clan, we would have potentially Earth and Fist. As an attack action, you may make a TN3 martial arts unarmed Earth check to strike 1 target character at range 0 to 1. If you succeed, you deal 3 damage to the target plus bonus successes. Not too bad. Or Earth Needs No Eyes. As a support action, you may make a TN3 meditation Earth check to gain an awareness of your surroundings. If you succeed, you become aware of all living creatures and objects touching the ground within range 3. Increase your vigilance by 3 until the end of the scene. Vigilance, of course, can be very helpful when somebody's trying to surprise you, which if you increase by 3, it's unlikely they'll be able to do so. Then we have our rule book, which it says to read last. We have, going all out of order here. So this is the first sheet that you are supposed to see when you open the box. So this is basically what's a role-playing game. There's an example of play, which is helpful, and they show you how to use the maps and character tokens so you know where people are at approximately. And that can be, covering both heroes and opposing characters. It also says you can draw your own maps, improvising using soda cans, books, and other objects that might be at hand, or forgo maps entirely, depending on which option suits your group's playstyle. And I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think this game is very much like Star Wars in that it works really well to play theater of the mind, where you don't use any maps at all. As long as you can keep in your mind an image of the relative distances between yourselves and any opponents that matter if you're in a battle, then you really don't need maps for most things or really anything. And then there's a little bit of background here on the Emerald Empire, which has been running strong for 1,000 years, and then the story so far. So, the recent untimely and mysterious death of the Emerald Champion Doji Satsume of the Crane Clan has thrown the Emerald Empire into turmoil. Each of the great clans suspiciously eyes the others and wonders whether the death was no tragic accident but a dishonorable act of murder. In these times of strife, a group of youths approach the village of Suma for the Topaz Championship and their Genpuku, the coming-of-age ceremony that will mark them as fully fledged samurai. Each contestant has come from a different clan and dreams of being the highest scoring contestant in the tournament, earning the title of Topaz Champion. Despite being pitted against one another, they are all united in their desire to succeed and bring honor to their clan and family. Not everyone in Suma has honorable motives for the contest, however. Personal vendettas, supernatural visitations, and deadly sabotage may undermine the following days, unless the new arrivals stay true to the code of Bushido and act as the honorable samurai they seek to become. So there's your adventure hook. The clans are gathering, and this gang of 4 young samurai is trying to come of age at their Genpuku ceremony and become true samurai. And they are trying to be the highest scoring contestant in the Topaz Championship, thereby earning the title of Topaz Champion. So they're kind of competing against each other in a way, but they're also competing against themselves in staying true to their code of honor, to their interpretation of Bushido, and trying to make sure that dishonorable elements and enemies are found out and appropriately exiled from the situation. Then we have our adventure book. We'll just quickly flip through so as not to spoil too much here. As you can see, it very much tells you that from this point on, this should be a Game Master only. But just to give you an idea of, it does summarize, of course, what's in the box, how you should use this book, and then they give you a pronunciation guide for the Japanese names, which is helpful. And they show you that these green boxes are for rules text that you need to know. There will be some read aloud text, which will be marked kind of indented in red text like this. And when you have red sidebars, those are kind of GM support, so advice on running the game and stuff like that. So they outline first the adventure structure, how the adventure begins, and you raise the curtain on the adventure with some read aloud text. And then you start getting into the scenes, and we can see that there are some hot tips, various bits of read aloud text for the GM to read to the characters, and how there's a big sort of beefy summary of running checks, helping characters to select their skill and approach, determining the target number, which is the big task for the GM, and then rolling and keeping and interpreting the dice, which is also something the GM is ultimately responsible for. A nice summary of the 5 rings. So really, as you go along, they introduce more and more complexity into the story, which is the same as the Star Wars starter games do, which they've done really well. So here they outline the other contestants in the championship. We've got some interesting story scenes. Then we've got the competition itself, different approaches to different challenges. Everything very clearly laid out for the GM to go step by step, basically, and help the characters get the hang of winning and losing checks, interpreting checks, competing in different types of scenarios against different types of opponents. And then we have a few NPC stat blocks. Well, one stat block, we have a ruffian. And then we have an interlude, where potentially players could spend experience to gain additional stuff. So there's actually quite a lot of play in this. I think you could probably spend at least a couple of sessions on this. Then we have a couple of more NPC stat blocks, wrap-ups, and other things you can do following the tournament in Tsuma. And then what you can do afterwards. And indeed, there is a free downloadable adventure to follow this, which is called In the Palace of the Emerald Champion. And of course, they recommend you buy the core rulebook, which of course will give you many, 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 many more options for paths. And on the back, we have sample target numbers for the GM to reference, critical strikes, which kind of, this can get more complex in the full game, but they make it work. And then a summary of the dice and their symbols. Finally, we have the rulebook, which is nice and perfect bound. Still pretty short. I don't know how many pages we got here. I would say it's not actually a table of contents, but it's 48 pages. We do have an index of sorts. So again, this is going to be a very much cut down rule set from the full game. I'm just going to give you enough ingredients to play the included characters, know the basics of the system, the target number system. Yeah, some additional rules for checks, descriptors of opportunity for different types of elements, strife and composure, which is really important, especially in the social scenes, how to recover composure and removing strife, becoming compromised, the benefits of unmasking, and example ways of unmasking. Then we have ring rankings and skill rankings. Basically, as I mentioned, you can pretty much go up to 5, and on very rare occasions, you will have characters with 6, but you don't see those until you get into the full game. So not really relevant in the beginner's game. And here we talk about the 5 rings and the skill ranks, advantages, all the various bits that we've seen on the character sheet, introducing complications, honor, glory, and status, and how they can be increased or decreased. Then we have techniques, using advantages in play. And now chapter 2 is all about skills, which are, of course, very important focus of the game, much like in Star Wars. So we have a table of the skill group. So as you can see on the character sheet as well, they're grouped as kind of artisan, martial, scholar, social, and trade skills. And within each group, you have various sub-skills. And they give you nice examples here of, which type of actions would fall under these different skill groups and how you could then refine them into a particular approach. And then they give you the details of each of the separate skills within each group. which is very nice and handy. Then we have the basic qualities of equipment. So name, skill used to wield the weapon, the range, the damage, which is usually a basic number plus additional damage, in this case fatigue, equal to the number of bonus successes on the combat check, and then any special qualities. And then they mention some possibilities of special qualities. There's not much of those here, basically, because we're in the basic game zone. We have ceremonial or concealable weapons, cumbersome or mundane. And then we have a nice table of equipment, including their special qualities and price if you wanted to pick one up in the village, perhaps. The difference between readied and sheathed weapons. Actually, there are a few more weapon qualities here. I think they're pretty much a complete list, actually. The use of ammunition. Basically, as long as you have a quiver of arrows available, you're assumed not to run out of ammunition. If you go an extremely long time without refilling it, like going to an armory or visiting a guard outpost, then you might say that the quiver is running low with only 3 arrows remaining, in which case you then gain a void point. You can refill a depleted quiver by visiting a location where you can purchase a fresh supply of arrow for 20 zenny, or making arrows using the survival skill if you have a bowyer's kit. And of course, they have the price and availability and function of those here. And then we get into the details of scenes and conflicts. So this just outlines the structure of the game in practice, of course, as we know. And then when we get into conflict actions, how the stances work, and how you should resolve an action step by step, which is nicely laid out. And then skirmishes, where we have battles, and these are the different types of actions you can take in that situation. Then we have duels, of course, which work a little bit differently. We have intrigue actions and social objectives that you can achieve. And then we have some information about range bands and how they work, terrain qualities and how they work, and then dealing damage and recovering from damage. Then we have the possible conditions that can happen. So yeah, we have a simplified kind of critical strike deal here. Conditions wise, we've got bleeding, burning, compromised, dazed, disoriented, enraged, exhausted, incapacitated, prone, unconscious. And then we have some sample NPCs. So it breaks down how their profiles work. We've got some basic human characters. We've got a peasant, Ashigaru, which is like a basic soldier. We have a bandit, experienced bandit. A ronin, which is a wandering samurai from the Path of Waves, or following the Path of Waves. Warrior monk, veteran bushi. A scholarly shugenja. A seasoned courtier. A provincial daimyo. They're pretty tough. Watch out for those guys. And then a few supernatural creatures, including goblins, kitsune, which are the tricksy fox creatures we've met from the Celestial Realm supplement, tengu, whom we met as well, and ogres. So yeah, I mean, they've thrown in quite a good amount of stuff in the rulebook, actually. Pretty decent amount of information, more than enough to get you started getting a feel for the system. And then we have this lovely sheet of tokens, which can be used on the map. Now, I'm thinking, yeah, so a flip side of the poster map I didn't look at before now becomes more relevant, because we can see Castle of the Emerald Champion all broken down in this lovely kind of cutaway view. So if you want to know exactly where characters or other enemies might be located that you're aware of, you can place their tokens in the appropriate spot and room on this map. Likewise, we have on the other end here, fold this properly, we have the village itself of Tsuma. So there's a dueling academy, we've got docks, we've got shrines, we've got the temple to Amaterasu, various bits and bobs, places that you characters might visit throughout the adventure. I might spend some time in the sake house. And yeah, it's quite reliant on the river trade, it seems, as there's a number of docks and warehouses along the end there. So these are the maps where you would use your character tokens, basically, just to know where everybody is and help you work out who's in range of different actions you want to take. I'll try and pop the plastic off these tokens here. Oh, they never make it easy with these bloody things. But just so you can see what they look like without the reflection of the light. As usual with FFG, the tokens are pretty decent quality, nice thick cardboard, and there are a number of them as well. Flip side is that they are nicely punched, but that means they tend to fall out quite easily. So I'll try and not do too much of that as I finally remove this from its prison. There we go. All right. Oh, I've already popped one out. Oh, again. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at these, see what we got here. So I assume they're the same on both sides. It seems we have our main characters up on the upper left. We have our Bushi, Courtier, our Dragon Monk, and Phoenix Shugenja. We've got a giant ogre here. We've got some NPCs. We've got some bits of fire burning. We've got some rather unfortunate looking dudes here. We have some, looks like various NPC characters. Those might be our bandits. Got some local folks. These guys don't look super thrilled. We've got Tengu. Who else we got? Some courtiers, I would guess. Maybe, oh, we got a shinobi over there. That's cool. And in fact, if you buy the adventures for L5R, which I do recommend, they each come with sets of tokens as well. So you'll end up with a huge collection of cool-looking tokens to use on various cool-looking maps, and that's always fun if you're around the table. Otherwise, you could find an online solution and do much the same thing. Just get a scanned copy of the map or a digital copy of the set itself, and you should be able to have these as digital assets that you can then place in Roll20 or whatever. And yeah, for those of you who haven't seen the dice yet, we'll just bust out a quick look at these. There's only 2 types, so it's much simpler than the Star Wars narrative dice system. We have the Black Void dice. Again, this is a success symbol. Here we have an opportunity plus a strife. The opportunity is this flower thing. Here we have just an opportunity. Here we have an explosive success and a strife. So an explosive success means you get to take another die of that type, add it to the pool, and roll it. And then you have your skill dice. You can see these are dodecahedrons rather than 6-sided dice. They do have a couple of blanks. Well, yeah, 2 blanks. But generally, you're more likely to get an interesting result on your skill dice. So that's why it's worth spending XP on your skill ranks. You've got a couple successes. You've got opportunities. You've got explosive success plus strife, success plus strife. More chances of getting successes, basically, the more skill dice you have. And there's more variety of outcomes as well. So in basic terms, the resolution of checks in L5R, I would say, is substantially easier to get the hang of than in Star Wars, which is one advantage it has. The flip side to that is that in Star Wars, you're working in a universe that a lot of people are already familiar with, whereas in L5R, there's a hell of a lot of lore and background that you probably will not be familiar with. This game kind of gives you just the bare bones of that structure, outlines it a little bit in the rule book and the GM's book, etc., and the README first sheet. But basically, if you really want the lore, you'll need to get the core rule books and all that stuff going for you. But in general, as with all the FFG sets, I think the actual contents are really nice. It's just a shame that the box itself is, really flimsy. I mean, this box was not even used. Everything was still sealed up, of course, and in perfect condition. Had never been played, but nevertheless, just simple storage wore the box down. So if you actively use this box around the table, it's going to fall apart pretty quickly. So just keep that in mind. But in any case, that's a quick look at the L5R role-playing game, beginner game. I hope that they reprint it soon. I think it is a really good intro to the system. You don't really need to know a lot of background going in. Just think, the Emerald Empire is a lot like feudal Japan, but there's magic and goblins and ogres and stuff, and they're real. Magic happens. People have chi and monk powers, and cool things can happen, and you use a narrative dice system that allows for some really interesting outcomes, not just the binary yes-no of the typical D&D type system. And so that means also that players have more agency as well. So if you have opportunity results, you can use them to affect the narrative. And as a player, I find that really empowering. Old school players of like really classic AD&D or whatever, they don't like that as much if you're used to the GM being the ultimate arbiter of everything. But modern games, a lot of them have these elements built in through, things like these narrative dice systems for FFG, Star Wars, or L5R, or systems like Powered by the Apocalypse, where it's really the whole narrative is considered to be in the conversation between players and GMs. They're almost on an equal level as far as contributing to the narrative. And then you have systems like Momentum and Threat in the 2D20 system for Dune and related games, where momentum spends and threat spends can change the narrative on the fly as well. So it's part of how modern role-playing has evolved, and actually I'm personally a big fan. I really like the Star Wars games. I haven't been able to run this set yet, but I'm looking forward to it, to use it as a way to introduce some new people to the game. L5R 5th edition, I have to admit I was skeptical as a fan of previous editions, but I think the switch to narrative dice and focusing more on the character building and the relationship to position, status, glory, honor, and Bushido, and so forth was a really good change. Not everybody agrees, and that's why the 4th edition books are very expensive on eBay. But yeah, I think it's a great game and a good way to get a foot in the door. So that's it for now. I hope that was helpful. A little bit scatterbrained and disorganized, so I apologize for that, but I haven't actually looked at this until now. I wanted to kind of give you a fresh set of eyes on it as I unboxed it. Again, I picked it up from eBay, so keep a lookout there if you can't find it yet in the stores. My understanding is that the dice starter sets for Star Wars and L5R are supposed to be coming back sometime this summer, but Edge Studio is not very communicative about timelines or anything, so don't hold me to that. But hopefully, you know, they did manage to get the first run of Star Wars reprints out, and they're still out there in retailers now. But it's kind of funny that you can buy the books and not the dice, so that's a bit odd. The same with the Genesis generic version of the Star Wars system, where you can buy the books and not the dice. But anyway, hopefully later this summer, when you might have some little bit of time, holiday from work, you can hopefully pick up some L5R and or Star Wars stuff and get your narrative dice on. So until then, I wish you all well. I hope you're staying safe, happy, and healthy as always. If you have any questions about the set, or you want to complain about any parts of it that I might have missed in my quick run through, or give me some hot tips on how to bring it to the table with new players, I always appreciate any ideas that you guys have for making my games around the table better. Let me know down in the comments. And until then, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. All right, take care and bye-bye.